Imagine working for your family's multi-million-dollar empire for 8 years. Only for your mother to give your golden child sister 65% of the shares. And toss you a humiliating 3%. When I finally had enough and tried to walk out, I accidentally uncovered a massive money laundering scheme hiding in the company's accounts. But the stolen money wasn't even the worst part. When I confronted them, my mother dropped a sickening truth they had hidden for 32 years: I was adopted. And the woman blackmailing them was actually my biological mother. Here is the story of how my entire life turned out to be a lie. It all started on a gloomy evening. I sat in the conference room on the 38th floor of Viridian Group's headquarters, my fingers unconsciously tracing the grain of the mahogany table. Outside the window, New York's evening sky hung heavy with leaden clouds. Like the old wool blankets I'd seen in the basement of our Long Island home as a child. Eleanor Vanderbilt sat at the head of the long table. Her charcoal gray Armani suit so crisp it looked like it had never been worn. At 57. Her hair was still jet black. Rumor had it she touched up the roots twice a month at Obsidian, the exclusive salon on the Upper East Side. My father Richard sat to her left, flipping through a document, his gold-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose. To my right was my sister Victoria, scrolling through her iPad with perfectly manicured French tips, the tiny diamonds on her nails catching the light. "Everyone's here," Eleanor said, her voice as sharp and angular as the woman herself. "Mr. Harris, you may begin." The middle-aged man in the navy suit stood and opened his folder. James Harris of Sullivan Cromwell had been our family's lawyer for 15 years. I remembered how he used to bring a box of Godiva chocolates every time he visited. One for me and one for Victoria. Then Victoria went to Harvard Business School, and his gifts became Montblanc pens and leather-bound business books. After that, there were only gifts for her. In accordance with Ms. Eleanor Vanderbilt's wishes, the equity of Viridian Group will be distributed as follows. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and scanned the document. Ms. Victoria Vanderbilt will receive 65% of the shares. Ms. Sebastiana Vanderbilt will receive 3% of the shares. And the remaining 32% will be held temporarily by Ms. Eleanor Vanderbilt until her passing. The rest of his words washed over me like a tide, leaving only those numbers echoing in my head. 65%. 3%. I looked up at my mother. She was taking a cup of tea from her assistant and gently blowing away the foam. My father still had his head down, but I saw his Adam's apple bob. Victoria had set down her iPad and folded her hands on the table, a perfectly calibrated smile playing on her lips, not triumphant, but unmistakably satisfied. "Mom," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Are you sure those numbers are correct?" Eleanor set down her teacup with a sharp clink. "Sebastiana." This was a carefully considered decision. Carefully considered, I repeated, my fists clenching under the table. "May I ask what exactly you considered?" The air in the conference room thickened. The air conditioner hissed softly, like some reptilian creature breathing. Victoria sighed, so quietly I almost missed it. She always did that, regarding my immaturity with a kind of pitying condescension. Just like 7 years ago, when I proposed developing an online custom business. She sighed and said, "Sebastiana, brick-and-mortar retail is our foundation." Then live commerce exploded, and Viridian closed a third of its traditional stores. Victoria's contributions to the group over the years are undeniable. Eleanor's voice cut through my thoughts. Her European expansion project contributed 40% of our profits last year. Her digital transformation plan kept us afloat during the pandemic. I nodded, saying nothing. Yes, I knew all that. Victoria was perfect, from elementary school to Harvard Business School. From intern to vice president. Every step she took fell exactly in time with our parents' expectations. I, on the other hand, Dropped out of Parsons School of Design in my sophomore year after a professor called my work too commercial at a departmental exhibition. When I came home and said I wanted to join the company, my father was silent for a long time before saying, "Start in the warehouse. Warehouse management." I spent 8 months in the old Brooklyn warehouse, taking inventory and checking fabric quality. There was no air conditioning, summer turned it into a sauna, winter into a freezer. In the 3rd month, I discovered a shipment of Italian silk being purchased at far above market rate and submitted a report. The purchasing vice president was fired. But no one ever asked how I'd noticed the discrepancy in the mountain of invoices. The design department under Sebastiana's leadership saw a 15% decline in performance last year. Eleanor continued. Her tone as flat as if she were reading a financial report. Furthermore, the American Heritage collection you spearheaded has resulted in severe inventory backlog. The group cannot bet its future on uncertainty. I thought of those clothes piled in the warehouse. Indigo denim jackets with hand-stitched leather details. Each button hand-forged from brass. Last fall, we held a launch event at a ranch in Montana, where models walked through golden wheat fields as a fine rain fell, the mist blurring everything like a Wyeth painting. The media reviews were glowing, but sales were abysmal. My sister had said, "It's too highbrow. Today's consumers want fast fashion. Influencer duplicates." I had said, "Someone has to make something different." She had said, "But this isn't an art gallery, it's a business." The conversation ended there. As most of our conversations did. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. As per the arrangement, Ms. Victoria Vanderbilt will become chairman and CEO of the group. Ms. Sebastiana Vanderbilt will retain her position as design director, with specific responsibilities to be determined by the new CEO. I looked at my father. He finally lifted his head, and our eyes met for a split second before he looked away. I knew that look well, the same look he'd given me when I came home crying after being bullied by the neighbor's kids, the same look when I insisted on studying art, the same look when I brought home my first boyfriend, who had 7 piercings and pink hair. "Dad," I said. Richard took off his glasses and cleaned them with a microfiber cloth. Slowly, meticulously. "Sebastiana," he said, "your mother and I are doing what's best for the company. Victoria is good at management. You're good at design. Isn't it better that we each do what we're best at? Each do what we're best at." I laughed. "So I get 3% and she gets 65%, that's what you call each doing what we're best at?" "Shares aren't everything," Eleanor said. "You'll still get your annual dividends. And your salary as design director won't change. Besides, 3% is more than many longtime employees get after 30 years with the company." The conference table was long, with 7 empty chairs between my mother and me. I suddenly remembered our dining table at home as a child. Just as long. Victoria always sat between our parents, and I sat at the far end. Martha the housekeeper would serve the food to our parents first. Then Victoria. Then me. Sometimes the dish was cold by the time it reached me. Sometimes it was already gone. "Sebastiana, you have to understand," Victoria began, her voice soft as if soothing a tantrum-throwing child. "I don't understand." I cut her off. Standing up, the chair leg scraped against the marble floor with a shrill sound. Outside, the sky had turned completely dark, and the city lights were coming on one by one. From this height, the streets looked like glowing veins and the cars like flowing blood cells. Viridian Group stood at the heart of Manhattan, 3 office towers, 4 flagship stores, 12 warehouses. I'd worked here for 8 years. And the design sketches I'd drawn stacked higher than a person. But now I owned only 3% of it. "That's it," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. I turned toward the door, my leather shoes making no sound on the carpet. As my hand closed around the brass doorknob, the cold metal reminded me of the doorknob on our old Long Island house, also brass. Always so cold in winter it stuck to your skin. Sebastiana. Eleanor called after me. I stopped but didn't turn around. Don't be late for the new product meeting next Monday, she said. Victoria has some restructuring plans to announce. And the design department is a key area for adjustment. I didn't respond. Turned the handle. And walked out. The corridor was long, lined with Viridian's promotional posters from over the years. The latest one was a portrait of Victoria, wearing the season's signature suit, standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window with the Empire State Building behind her. The headline read New Vision. New Future. Further down was a poster from 5 years ago, when my father was still chairman. He and my mother stood side by side. With Victoria and me between them, I was on the very edge. Half my body almost out of the frame. The elevator took its time coming up from the first floor. I stared at the blinking numbers and remembered something from years ago. When I was 10 and Victoria was 13. A gypsy fortune teller came to our house. She read Victoria's palm and said she was born to be a queen, destined for greatness. When it was my turn, she studied my hand for a long time before telling my parents. This child has a wanderer's fate. She will find peace only far from home. My mother had smiled and handed the fortune teller a $100 bill, saying nothing. But at dinner that night, she gave Victoria 2 lobster tails and only a single serving of broccoli to me. The elevator doors opened. Empty inside. I stepped in and pressed B2. In the underground parking garage was my car, a 6-year-old white Toyota 4Runner. When I bought it, Victoria had just gotten a new Porsche 911. My mother said, "Look at Victoria. Then look at yourself." My father said, "Practical is good." As I drove out of the garage, the toll gate automatically lifted when it recognized my license plate. In the system, my plate was registered as Viridian Group Design Department, Sebastiana Vanderbilt. I wondered if that would change next week. My phone vibrated with a bank notification. My salary had been deposited, after taxes. $12,000 a month as design director. Not bad for most people. But it would only buy 3 meals at Per Se, Manhattan's most expensive restaurant, where Victoria had entertained investors just last week. Spending $32,000 on a single dinner, charged to the company account. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the Hudson River waterfront. This area was full of old factories converted into studios. And I knew several independent designers who sometimes came here for drinks. Tonight I didn't want to see anyone, I just parked by the embankment and rolled down the window. The river wind was strong, carrying the smell of water. Across the river in Jersey City, the lights were still on in the top floors of Viridian Tower. I knew they were probably still in that conference room, discussing how to ensure a smooth transition, how to optimize the structure, how to dot every legal I and cross every legal T regarding my 3%. My phone vibrated again. This time on Slack. Zoe, my assistant, had posted a crying face in the design department group. Heard there are going to be layoffs. Is it true? No one replied. They were probably discussing it endlessly in private groups. I turned off the screen and pulled a pack of cigarettes from the glove compartment. I'd quit 3 years ago, but there were still a few left. I lit one and took a drag, coughing violently. The smoke filled the car and was quickly blown away by the river wind. I remembered my first cigarette on the roof of Parsons when I was 18. Thinking the world held endless possibilities. My professor said I had an excellent sense of color, my classmates said my designs had soul. Then I dropped out and came home. And my mother took away all my art supplies. Those useless things, she said. Don't touch them again. I never touched a paintbrush again. After joining the company, I drew designs on a computer, mixed colors with software, and every piece had to go through marketing evaluation, sales forecasting, and financial accounting. The final products, like those American Heritage clothes piled in the warehouse, were beautiful and polished, but missing something. What was missing? My phone screen lit up again. This time with a text from my sister, Sebastiana. Mom didn't mean it that way. Let's talk sometime. Just the two of us. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I stubbed out the cigarette and started the car. On the way home, I stopped at a 7-Eleven for a bottle of water. On the magazine rack by the register, the cover of Forbes featured Victoria Vanderbilt with the headline, Gen Z CEO, How a Traditional Apparel Company is Breaking the Mold. She smiled perfectly, showing 8 teeth. Exactly the same smile she'd worn in the conference room. I handed the water to the cashier and scanned my phone to pay. As I walked out, I heard the two clerks whispering, "Isn't that the younger Vanderbilt daughter from Viridian? Doesn't look like it. Driving such a beat-up car. Heard she's not the favorite." The whole company went to her sister. My hand paused on the car door handle. Then I got in as if nothing had happened. The car pulled into the night, and the convenience store's light grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared around the corner. I got back to my apartment at 10 o'clock. It was a 1.200 square foot high-rise in Brooklyn that I'd bought 3 years ago with 5 years of savings. With a 30-year mortgage. Victoria lived in a single-family mansion in East Hampton with a private beach and tennis court. And the company had given her 3 parking spaces. After showering, I checked my phone again. Besides work messages, there was one from my mother's secretary, Ms. Vanderbilt. "Please be sure to attend the 9 a.m. meeting next Monday. Meeting materials have been sent to your email." I opened my email and found the new message. Attached was a 27-page PDF titled Viridian Group Organizational Restructuring Plan. I downloaded it, opened it, and flipped to the design department section. Streamline personnel structure. Focus on core business. Discontinue non-profitable product lines. The words danced on the screen, blurring into a mass. I took off my glasses and rubbed my temples. On the nightstand was a framed photo the employees had given me for my birthday last year, a group picture of the entire design department. 12 people. All smiling happily. We'd just finished the spring collection. Worked late into the night. And gone out for tacos together. Zoe had gotten drunk and hugged me, saying, "Working for you is hard. But it's worth it." I wondered how many of those faces would still be there after this restructuring plan. Before turning off the lights, I took one last look out the window. The lights were still on in Viridian Tower, the most recognizable building in the skyline. Its rooftop featured a giant neon logo, an abstract iris wrapped in a ribbon. I'd designed that logo when I was a junior in college, never expecting my mother would like it enough to make it the group's symbol. That was probably the only thing I'd ever done for this family that was fully accepted. My phone screen lit up once in the darkness, then went out. I didn't look at it. As I closed my eyes, I thought of the yard in our old Long Island house. There was an old oak tree that bloomed with white flowers every summer. Victoria liked to read under it, so my mother had a wicker chair and small table placed there. I preferred climbing the tree, sitting on the branches and looking at the sky through the leaves. Once I climbed too high and couldn't get down, sitting there for an entire afternoon. It wasn't until dusk that Martha the housekeeper noticed I was missing and called my father to bring a ladder. I don't remember what my father said when he carried me down. I just remember his strong arms and the pleasant smell of tobacco on his clothes. Not long after that, my mother had the tree pruned, cutting off all the climbable branches. The tree was still there, but you couldn't climb it anymore. Just like so many things. So many people. Monday morning brought a steady rain, turning New York into a wash of gray. Like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. I parked in my designated spot on B2 of Viridian Tower to find the space next to me empty. That was Victoria's spot. And she usually didn't arrive until 9:30. The elevator took me directly to the 24th floor design department. The frosted glass logo on the door was streaked with rain. When I pushed it open, the office was already full. 12 desks. 12 familiar faces. But the atmosphere was nothing like usual. No one was drawing. No one was discussing fabrics, everyone was staring at their computer screens. Or pretending to. Good morning, Director. Zoe stood up, holding a latte that spilled a few drops on the file she was handing me. Morning. I took the coffee and noticed her eyes were puffy. As I walked through the office, I heard the deliberate hush of typing. Old Tom in the corner suddenly started coughing violently. And Sarah next to him handed him a tissue. These small sounds amplified in the silence. Like stones dropped into a deep well. My office was at the far end, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Today the glass was covered in raindrops. And the river was muddy as a yellow silk ribbon. On my desk were the meeting materials, not digital, but printed out. A thick stack with a yellow sticky note on top, 9 a.m. First conference room. At 8:50. I finished reading the design department section of the restructuring plan. Streamlining personnel meant a 40% layoff. Keeping 5 core designers and 2 assistant designers. With all other positions outsourced. Focusing on core business meant discontinuing all product lines under $200. Including the Dawn collection we'd worked on for 3 years, everyday workwear for young professionals that had sold 70,000 pieces last year. The list of non-profitable product lines to be cut had American Heritage at the top. With a note, discontinue immediately. Inventory disposal. I closed the file and took a sip of coffee. It was cold. At 9 o'clock sharp, I entered the first conference room. Around the oval table sat more than a dozen people: Victoria, Eleanor, the CFO, the HR director, the marketing director, and several faces I didn't recognize, young men in custom suits. Their watches glinting under the lights. I later learned they were strategy consultants Victoria had brought in from McKinsey. Let's begin, Victoria said from the head of the table, wearing a pale apricot suit that made her skin look luminous. She didn't look at me. Her eyes fixed on her iPad. The HR director spoke first, a woman in her 50s named Ms. Carter who had been with the company for 20 years. She read the layoff plan, compensation standards, and handover process in a monotone, like reciting a grocery list. The design department will see the most significant changes. Ms. Carter finally got to the point. Ms. Vanderbilt, your department needs to submit the retention list by Friday. Here are the evaluation criteria. She pushed a document across the table. I opened it. The first item was performance contribution over the past 3 years, followed by a complex formula. The second was alignment with company strategy, the third team collaboration, and the fourth innovation, which accounted for only 10% of the weight. Who set these criteria? I asked. The conference room fell silent for a few seconds. The air conditioner hissed again. Jointly decided by management. Victoria finally looked up. Her gaze calm as it swept over me. Sebastiana. Reform is necessary. For Viridian to survive. We need to trim the fat. So the design department is the first to be trimmed? I closed the file. Marketing wasted $30 million on 2 wrong endorsements last year. How much fat are they trimming? The marketing director's face turned red. And he started to say something. But Victoria raised her hand to stop him. Every department will be adjusted, she said. Today we're discussing the design department's plan. Do you have any specific objections? I looked into her eyes. We didn't look much alike. She took after our mother. With sharp features, I took after our father. With softer contours. But in that moment, I saw something familiar in her face, not features. But that expression. That look of absolute certainty that brooked no argument. It was the same look she'd had when she stole my toys as a child. The American Heritage Collection can't be discontinued, I said. Give me 6 months. And I can adjust the product line. Reduce costs. 6 months, the CFO interrupted. A man with gold-rimmed glasses. Ms. Vanderbilt. That collection has already lost over $5 million. How much more will it burn in 6 months? But it represents the brand's identity. Brand identity that consumers don't pay for is worthless. Victoria cut me off. Her voice still level but slightly faster. Sebastiana. I know you're attached to this collection. But the company can't pay for sentimentality. Eleanor said nothing throughout. She sat to Victoria's left, slowly flipping through her file and occasionally taking a sip of tea. I remembered how, when I was a child, she would do the same when Victoria and I fought, say nothing. Wait for us to finish. Then announce the result. And the result was always Victoria winning. Any other objections? Victoria asked. I looked around the room. Ms. Carter was playing with her pen. The CFO was typing on his phone. And the consultants were whispering among themselves. Outside, the rain was falling harder, tapping against the glass. No, I said. Then it's settled. Victoria swiped her iPad. Meeting adjourned. People stood up. And the room filled with the sound of chairs scraping. Footsteps. And murmurs. I stayed seated, staring out the window. A cargo ship moved slowly through the rain on the river. Like a gray behemoth. Sebastiana. Eleanor's voice came from behind me. I turned around. We were alone in the conference room. And she was standing by the door, holding the file. Come home for dinner tonight, she said. Your father made soup. What kind of soup? Cream of mushroom. You used to love it as a child. I laughed. I used to love tomato soup. She blinked. Then smiled faintly. Did I? I must have forgotten. Yes. You forgot. You remembered that Victoria is allergic to nuts. That her high school homeroom teacher's name was Mr. Wilson. That she's still friends with her college roommate. You forgot the date of my graduation. Whether my birthday is in March or April. What kind of soup I like. I have plans tonight, I said. Eleanor nodded and said nothing more. Turning to leave. Her high heels clicked on the marble floor, growing fainter until they disappeared. When I returned to the design department, the office was even quieter. Zoe came up to me, her eyes red. Director. HR just talked to old Tom. Talked about what? Forced resignation, her voice trembled. Said he's too old to keep up with digital tools. Old Tom has been with the company for 16 years. I looked toward the corner desk. Old Tom was sitting there, hunched over, staring at his computer screen. On the screen was a design for a modified denim jacket with delicate stars embroidered on the collar, his proposed fall flagship piece that he'd been working on for 3 months. I see, I said. Tell everyone to come to my office in 10 minutes. 12 people crowded into my not very large office. Some standing, some leaning against the walls. The rain tapped against the glass. And the room smelled of coffee and paper. I stood behind my desk, looking at these familiar faces. Old Tom was 54. With a daughter in college, Sarah had just had her second child and was still paying off her mortgage. Zoe had gotten married last year and was saving up for a house with her husband. You've all seen the restructuring plan, I said, my voice hoarse over the sound of the rain. The retention list is due Friday. No one spoke. Sarah stared at her shoes, which had a spot of paint that wouldn't come off. I'll fight for as many of you as I can, I continued, even though I knew how empty those words were. Director. Old Tom suddenly spoke, his voice rough. If we do have to go, will the severance be enough? He didn't finish, but we all knew what he meant. Enough to pay his daughter's tuition? Enough to get by until he found another job? Enough to hold his life together when it suddenly fell apart? The company will pay according to New York State standards, I said, each word heavy as a stone. The meeting ended quickly. After everyone left, I was alone in my office with the walls covered in designs. From Viridian's early classic dresses to later ready-to-wear collections to my American Heritage line. Every season's flagship piece was framed and hung in chronological order. The oldest ones were yellowed at the edges, the newest still gleaming. My phone vibrated with an unknown number. I answered, and the caller identified herself as an editor from Vogue. Wanting to schedule an interview. Interview who? You. Miss Sebastiana Vanderbilt, she said enthusiastically. We're doing a feature on the fusion of tradition and modernity. And your American Heritage collection is perfect. That collection has been discontinued, I said. There was a long silence on the other end. Discontinued? But our editor-in-chief was very impressed. Company strategic adjustment, I replied, using the exact phrase I'd heard in the meeting. After hanging up, I stood by the window watching the rain for a long time. The river was a vast gray expanse, where water and sky merged. My phone rang again. This time from my father. Sebastiana, he sounded breathless. You're really not coming home tonight? Yeah. Your mother, she's only trying to do what's best for you. I'd heard that line for 30 years. When she threw away my art supplies, it was for my own good. When she forced me to study business, it was for my own good. Now, when she took away the collection I'd poured my heart into, it was still for my own good. Dad, I said, if you really thought it was for my own good, why didn't you say anything in the meeting? There was a long silence on the other end. I heard the click of a lighter. Once. Twice. Before he spoke. What good would it have done? Your mother runs this family. Victoria runs the company now. And what about you? I asked. What are you in this family? In this company? My father didn't answer. I heard him take a long drag on his cigarette and exhale slowly. Finally he said, I saved you some soup. Come get it whenever you want. The call ended. The office was completely silent now, except for the rain and the monotonous hum of the air conditioner. In the afternoon, I went to the warehouse. The old Brooklyn factory-turned-storage facility was 3 stories of concrete. Cold in winter and hot in summer. Old Joe, the warehouse manager, looked surprised when he saw me. Ms. Vanderbilt? What brings you here? To check the American Heritage inventory, I said. Old Joe led me through rows of shelves. The clothes hung by collection and size, covered in clear plastic dust covers that glowed faintly in the dim light. When we reached the backmost section, he pulled back a curtain. It's all here. Indigo, khaki, rust red, charcoal black, denim jackets, cargo pants, modified shirts. The leather glowed with a soft sheen under the lights. And the embroidery was done by Amish women. 1 star took 3 days to stitch. 1 eagle 5. I picked up a jacket at random. The tag read, American Heritage Wilderness Collection. Manufactured September 2025. How many pieces? I asked. Over 3.700. Old Joe said. Plus the fabrics, denim. Waxed cotton, stacked in Section B, worth a lot of money too. I ran my fingers over the embroidery. The silk thread was cool against my skin. I remembered last fall, when my team and I went to an Amish community in Pennsylvania and stayed for a week in those farmhouses with no electricity. The women were all between 50 and 70 years old. Their eyesight failing but their hands steady as rocks. Sarah had said, "This craft will be gone forever if we don't preserve it." So we made space in our designs for these traditional embroidery techniques to find a home. We just didn't expect that home to be taken away so soon. What does the company say to do with them? I asked. No word yet. Old Joe hesitated. But Victoria sent someone yesterday to take photos and get an appraisal. I heard they're going to liquidate them as surplus. Sell them on live stream. Live stream clearance. $9.99 with free shipping. I hung the jacket back up, the plastic cover rustling softly. Old Joe, I said. Don't touch these goods yet. Wait for my word. He looked at me, about to say something, then nodded. On the way back to the office, the rain lightened but the sky grew darker. At a red light, I saw a bridal shop on the side of the road. In the window was a wedding dress covered in intricate lace. Warm yellow light streamed out of the shop, where a bride-to-be was twirling in her dress while her fiancé took photos, his eyes crinkling with laughter. The light turned green. The car behind me honked, and I pressed the gas. By 7 o'clock that evening, half the design department was still there. Zoe was organizing files. Sarah was editing designs on her computer. And old Tom was still working on the star jacket embroidery pattern. I walked over to his desk and saw the paper covered in dense annotations, gradient color for stars, frayed edges, distressed pockets. Old Tom, I said. Go home. He looked up, his reading glasses slipping down his nose. Almost done. I need to make this pattern clear for the artisans. Otherwise they won't understand. The collection has been discontinued. His hand paused, leaving a small ink blot on the paper. I know, he said softly. But I have to finish what I started. I stood there watching him draw the sharp angles of the stars one by one. Outside, the city lights were coming on one by one. From the 24th floor, I could see the neon signs flickering on the other side of the river. The Viridian logo was lit up too, that iris. That ribbon, glowing cold white in the rainy night. My phone vibrated again. This time from my sister. Where are you? Mom wants you to call her back. I didn't reply. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. The evening rush hour traffic flowed like a river of light. I suddenly remembered many years ago. On a rainy night just like this one, I'd hidden in my studio working on my senior thesis. Back then I thought the future was like the blank sheet of paper in front of me. I could draw anything I wanted. Now I know better. The paper is given to you by someone else. The pen is chosen for you. And even what you draw has to be approved by others. At 8 o'clock, I locked my office door. A few lights were still on in the open office. And old Tom was finally packing up to leave. He carried an old canvas bag with a broken zipper held together with a safety pin. Director, he turned at the door. Can I take that jacket pattern home to finish? On my own time. Not company time. I just want to finish it. I nodded. He smiled, his wrinkles crinkling into a map of years. As the elevator descended, the mirrored walls reflected my face. 32 years old. No wrinkles around the eyes yet. But my gaze no longer held the spark it had 10 years ago. Back at Parsons, My professor said there was light in my eyes. I wondered if it was still there. The B2 parking garage was empty and quiet. My white Toyota was parked in the corner, next to a brand new black Bentley, Victoria's. She hadn't left yet. I looked up at the elevator shaft. The lights were still on in the top floor. When I started the car, the radio came on automatically, playing an old song, "Time is a Journey with No Return." The good and the bad are all scenery. I turned off the radio. The car fell silent, except for the regular swish of the windshield wipers. Left, right, left, right. I pulled out of the garage and merged into traffic. At a red light, my phone screen lit up with a bank notification: Viridian Group dividend deposited. Amount 68% less than last year. The note read, distributed according to new equity ratio. 3% dividend. I stared at that number until the car behind me honked. I pressed the gas, and the car plunged into the rainy night, sending up a spray of water. I passed an open Chinese restaurant and pulled in. The place was almost empty, and the owner was watching TV behind the counter. I ordered beef noodle soup, and the steam fogged up my glasses. As I wiped them, I heard a line from the TV show: "There's no fairness in this world. Only strength and weakness." The owner noticed me looking and smiled. "Good show, isn't it? About business wars." I nodded and ate my noodles. The soup was too salty. The beef was tough. And the noodles were overcooked. But I finished every last bite. Even drank the soup. When I paid, the owner handed me my change in crumpled bills. "You look like you're having a rough time, young lady," he said suddenly. "Work troubles?" "Something like that." "Ah. Nothing that can't be overcome." He wiped the counter. "I've had this restaurant for 20 years. Landlord raising rent. Customer complaints. My good-for-nothing son, but the restaurant's still here. And life goes on." I took the change and thanked him. When I walked out, the rain had finally stopped. A crack had opened in the clouds, revealing a half-moon, fuzzy around the edges like a sleepy eye. I got back to my apartment just after 10. In the shower, I let the hot water beat down on my back until my muscles relaxed. In the mirror, the scar on my chest was clearly visible, from when I fell out of that oak tree as a child and broke 2 ribs. My mother had stayed with me in the hospital all night. And in the morning she'd stroked my hair and said, "Don't climb so high again." After that, I never did. I never took risks. Never did anything out of line, followed the path they'd laid out for me. And what did I get for it? I dried my hair and turned on my computer. My inbox was overflowing with unread emails, official notices from HR, budget adjustments from finance, quarterly reports from marketing, and an invitation from the American Traditional Craft Foundation, asking me to judge their traditional apparel innovation competition. It had been sent 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't replied. I moved the mouse, hovering over the reply button. In the end, I closed my email without clicking. My phone screen lit up with a calendar reminder: tomorrow 3 p.m. Quarterly meeting with fabric suppliers. The note read, "Victoria Vanderbilt will also attend." I put down my phone and walked out onto the balcony. The night air smelled of rain and damp earth. Most of the lights in the building across the street were out, only a few still glowing. In one of them, a figure moved, carrying a cup, walked to the window, stood for a moment, then walked away. Everyone lives in their own night, guarding their own secrets. Back inside, I pulled an old sketchbook from the bookshelf. The pages were yellowed with age. The first page was filled with college doodles, distorted figures, exaggerated expressions, bold colors. Back then I drew whatever I liked, regardless of what anyone thought. In the middle was an unfinished design. A women's suit with a mandarin collar and frog buttons, but with Western tailoring and a fitted waist. The note beside it read, "Fusion? Conflict? Or rebirth?" I'd drawn it 7 years ago, shortly after joining the company. When I showed it to my mother, she said, "Neither fish nor fowl." When I showed it to my sister, she said, "The market will never accept it." So it sat there, unfinished, for 7 years. I picked up a pencil and continued drawing. Narrowed the sleeves, lengthened the hem, left space for embroidery on the lapel. I drew until the sky began to lighten and the birds started singing. When I looked up, my neck was stiff and sore, but the paper held a complete design. My alarm went off at 7 a.m. A new day. I washed up, got dressed, and headed out. In the elevator, I ran into the same neighbor, a lawyer in her 40s with a briefcase and dark circles under her eyes. "Morning," she yawned. "Another long day?" "Something like that." "You artists work so hard?" "I'm not an artist," I said. "I'm a designer." "Is there a difference?" The elevator reached the lobby. As the doors opened, I said, "Artists create for themselves. Designers design for others." I walked outside into the crisp morning air. Puddles dotted the sidewalk, reflecting the broken sky. My white Toyota was parked in its usual spot. A few yellowed maple leaves on the hood. I got on the road before the morning rush hour. The street's empty. At a red light, I watched a street sweeper collecting leaves. Back and forth. Back and forth. Swept into a pile. Loaded into the truck. Taken away. Tomorrow there would be new leaves. And the process would repeat. Day after day. I arrived at the office at 7:30. The parking garage was empty except for the security guard making his rounds. He saluted when he saw me. "Early today, Ms. Vanderbilt?" "Yeah. Your sister didn't leave until 11 last night," he added unnecessarily. "Your family really works hard." I smiled and said nothing. The elevator took me to the 24th floor. The lights were still off in the design department. I was the first one here. I opened my office door, and morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting a golden trapezoid on the floor. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my desk. The computer booted up, and an email notification popped up. The first email of the day was from HR, titled "Notice of Design Department Job Competition." I opened it. There were more than 20 detailed rules. The last one read, "All retained employees must sign new employment contracts with a salary structure of base salary plus performance bonus, with performance accounting for 60% of total compensation." I closed the email and looked out the window. The sun was fully up now, and the river sparkled with golden light. The glass facades of the buildings across the river reflected the sunlight, blindingly bright. At 8 o'clock, employees started arriving. Zoe brought me my coffee, her eyes still puffy. "Director," she placed a file on my desk. "The fabric suppliers sent their new quotation. Prices are up 15%. Reason? They say raw material costs have increased." She hesitated. "But Sarah heard that Victoria instructed them to raise prices. She wants to replace them with her classmate's company." I opened the quotation. Covered in dense numbers. This supplier had been with us for 8 years. Since my father's time. And their quality had always been consistent. Last year their owner had visited the company. An elderly man in his 60s with hands permanently stained blue from years of dyeing fabric. "How are preparations for this afternoon's meeting going?" I asked. "All materials are ready." Zoe hesitated again. "But Victoria said she'll be chairing the meeting." "I see." After Zoe left, I called the supplier's owner. It rang 7 or 8 times before he answered. His voice hoarse. Ms. Vanderbilt? Mr. Anderson. I saw the quotation. There was a long silence on the other end. Victoria is putting a lot of pressure on us. Ms. Vanderbilt. Our margins are thin as it is, we can't absorb a 15% increase. I know. I said. Can you come to the meeting this afternoon? I'll be there, he said. Ms. Vanderbilt. If I may say something, our factory has worked with Veridian for so many years. Never had a quality issue. But these days, new management wants to bring in their own people. I understand. But there are 50 workers in my factory who depend on this job to feed their families. I understand. I hung up, feeling a tightness in my chest. I walked to the window and took a deep breath. A tour boat passed by on the river, leaving a long white wake. The tourists on board were taking photos, their flashes barely visible in the bright sunlight. At 10 o'clock, my mother's internal line rang. Sebastiana. Come to my office. The chairman's office occupied the entire top floor. It had been decorated by an Italian designer in a minimalist style, with extensive white and natural wood. Eleanor sat behind her massive desk, with a wall of bookshelves behind her filled with leather-bound books and corporate trophies. Sit, she gestured to the chair opposite her. I sat down. On the desk was a Celadon teacup with clear tea and a few floating leaves. Victoria told me about the fabric supplier situation. She got straight to the point. Replacing them is the right decision. That factory has outdated equipment and doesn't fit our premium positioning. Their hand-dyeing technique is a national heritage craft. Heritage doesn't pay the bills. Eleanor picked up her teacup. Sebastiana. I know you're sentimental. But businesses have to evolve. That means letting go of outdated things. Including people? I asked. Old Tom's craftsmanship is also heritage level. Is he next to be let go? She set down her teacup with a sharp clink. I heard about old Tom, she said. He's getting older. His eyesight is failing. He deserves to retire and enjoy his life. The company will provide generous compensation. He doesn't want to retire. He wants to draw. That's his problem. Eleanor looked at me, her gaze steady. Sebastiana. You're a manager too. You should know that sentimentality has no place in business. I laughed. It must have been an ugly laugh. Because she frowned. Mom. I said. Do you remember when I was 10? You sent me to art lessons? My teacher was Miss Carter, who lived in an old house in Greenwich Village that smelled like paint. The first lesson, she told me to draw an apple. And I drew a square one. You said, it's okay. A square apple is still an apple. Eleanor's expression softened for a moment. I remember. You were always stubborn. Now I don't draw square apples anymore. I said. I draw round. Red. Perfect apples exactly the way you want them. But you're still not satisfied. The office fell silent. The central air conditioning hissed softly. And the antique clock on the wall ticked away. My father had bought that clock. A Swiss piece that had kept perfect time for 30 years. For this afternoon's meeting, Eleanor finally said. Cooperate with Victoria. Don't argue in front of everyone. It makes us look bad. I've never been the one making us look bad. I said. I am the joke. As I stood to leave, she called after me. You're really not coming home for dinner tonight? No. Your father keeps asking about you. Let him ask. I said. He's only ever asked. Anyway. I walked out of her office. The corridor was long. The carpet thick enough to absorb all sound. By the elevator was a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the small plaza below. A few employees were smoking there, blowing rings of smoke toward the sky. One of them looked up and saw me, then quickly stubbed out his cigarette. The elevator arrived. As the doors closed, I took one last look at the top floor corridor, quiet. Empty. Like a museum gallery where everything was perfectly arranged and nothing had any warmth. Back in the design department, Zoe met me with a pale face. Director. Old Tom, he submitted his resignation. When? Just now. HR already approved it and told him to leave today. I hurried to old Tom's desk. It was already empty, the computer was off. The drawings were gone. His mug was washed and upside down on the table. Only that old canvas bag still hung on the back of the chair. The safety pin holding the zipper together swaying slightly. Where is he? He packed up and left. Zoe's voice broke. He said he didn't want to wait for the company to fire him. It's more dignified to leave on his own. I turned and ran out. The elevator descended to the lobby, and I burst through the revolving doors. The plaza was crowded with people. I scanned the crowd and finally spotted that hunched figure with the canvas bag. Crossing the street. Old Tom. He turned and saw me. Stopping in his tracks. The light was flashing. About to turn red. I ran toward him. Cars honking as they sped past. Why didn't you wait for me? I gasped. Old Tom smiled, his wrinkles deepening. I understand. Director. The company needs to reform. Us old-timers have to make way for the young ones. I didn't agree to this. Whether you agreed or not, the result would be the same. He patted my shoulder, his hand thin and bony. I finished that jacket pattern and left it on your desk. If there's ever a chance, use it. The light turned red. He turned to leave, but I called after him. Old Tom. What are you going to do now? He thought for a moment. My daughter wants me to stay with her for a while in Florida. It's warm there. Maybe I'll find a tailor shop to help out. These hands of mine can still work. With that, he waved and walked into the crowd. The canvas bag swayed, and the safety pin finally fell off. But he didn't notice. I bent down and picked up the safety pin. The metal cold against my palm. When I looked up, he was gone around the corner. Back in my office. The rolled-up pattern was indeed on my desk. I unrolled it. The star jacket embroidery was complete. Every detail annotated perfectly. In the corner was a small note, "Thank you for these years. Thomas Anderson." I rolled it back up and put it in the deepest drawer of my desk. At 2:50 that afternoon, I walked into the third conference room with my meeting materials. Everyone was already there: Victoria, the CFO, the purchasing director, and several unfamiliar faces, presumably from her classmates' company. Mr. Anderson sat at the very end, an unopened bottle of water in front of him. "Let's begin," Victoria said. She was wearing a navy blue suit today, her hair pulled back in a tight bun that revealed her smooth forehead. The meeting proceeded according to schedule. The purchasing director presented the new supplier's advantages: digital management, automated production lines, experience working with international brands. The CFO showed the cost comparison, although the unit price was 5% higher. Overall management costs were 10% lower, making it more cost-effective in the long run. Mr. Anderson said nothing throughout, his hands resting on the table, his knuckles large and his skin cracked. "Mr. Anderson." Victoria finally turned to him. "Do you have anything to add?" The old man looked up, his gaze sweeping over every face in the room before settling on mine. He smiled faintly. "Our factory is small. Our equipment is old. But every yard of fabric is dyed by hand by our workers. The colors are accurate. The color fastness is high, all the data is in the report. He pushed a document across the table. But I know that these days, it's all about efficiency and scale. We can't compete with that. Viridian appreciates your many years of support, Victoria said in her official tone. The purchasing department will contact you regarding the termination details. Mr. Anderson nodded, unscrewed the cap of his water bottle, and took a sip. His hand trembled slightly, spilling a little water, which he quickly wiped up with his sleeve. The meeting ended. People stood up, shook hands, and said their goodbyes. I walked over to Mr. Anderson. I'll walk you out. We were alone in the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected our two figures, him short and hunched, me taller but also slightly stooped. Ms. Vanderbilt, he said suddenly. My granddaughter is going to college this year and wants to study fashion design. Do you think there's a future in this field? I didn't know how to answer. The elevator reached the lobby, and the doors opened, flooding us with light. If she loves it, I said. Let her study. Mr. Anderson smiled and patted my arm. You're just like your father, Mr. Richard Vanderbilt. When my factory burned down and I was about to go bankrupt, he lent me $500,000 interest-free. I've never forgotten that kindness. He walked out the revolving doors, his back disappearing into the harsh afternoon sunlight. Back in the design department, the office was unnaturally quiet. Sarah was packing up her things. When she saw me, she forced a smile. Director, I think I won't be staying much longer either. My husband says I should stay home with the kids. Do you want to leave? She was silent for a long time, then shook her head. But we need the money. If performance is 60% of my salary, I'll probably make less than half of what I make now. The kids need daycare. The mortgage needs to be paid. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. At 4 o'clock, Victoria's internal line rang. Let's have dinner tonight. Just the two of us. Why? To talk. She chose a rooftop restaurant in Tribeca with a view of the city, where dinner started at $300 per person. When I arrived, she was already there. A glass of lemon water in front of her. Outside the window was the Manhattan night sky. Tour boats dragging strings of lights across the Hudson River. The foie gras here is excellent, she handed me the menu. I'm a vegetarian now, I said. She looked up, surprised. Since when? Last week. It wasn't true. I'd decided that afternoon. For no particular reason, I just suddenly didn't want to eat meat anymore. I ended up ordering a salad and pasta. While we waited for our food, Victoria pulled out her iPad and opened a file. Take a look at this. I took it. It was Viridian's 3-year strategic plan, covered in dense data and charts. When I flipped to the design department section, it read, focus on luxury women's wear. Expand business menswear. Explore smart wearables. What do you think? She asked. It's comprehensive. I know what you're thinking, she put down her iPad. You think I'm cold and heartless. But Sebastiana, this is how business works. Dad's generation relied on personal connections. Our generation relies on data and rules. The waiter brought our food. The salad was fresh. The arugula perfectly bitter. Old Tom is gone, I said. Mr. Anderson's contract is being terminated. Are these all necessary sacrifices in your eyes? Optimizations, she corrected me. The company is going public, and the financials need to look good. Every part of the business has to be efficient. Old Tom's craftsmanship is beautiful, but it's too slow. Mr. Anderson's fabric is reliable, but it's too expensive. We're competing with international brands now. We can't stay stuck in the artisan workshop era. So Viridian is going to become another Zara? Another Uniqlo? Viridian is going to become a brand that survives. Victoria cut into her foie gras with elegant precision. Mom entrusted the company to me. And I have a responsibility to it. To the shareholders. To the employees, not to individual employees. But to the entire team. I looked at her. In the soft restaurant lighting. Her face was as perfect as a sculpture. Every line precisely placed. I suddenly remembered when we were children. And she had a terrible fever of 104 degrees. I'd secretly taken all my allowance and bought her a box of chocolates, leaving it on her bedside table. When she woke up and saw it, she cried and said, "You're the best little sister ever." That was over 20 years ago. Victoria, I said, do you remember that box of chocolates I gave you? Her hand paused. The knife and fork making a slight scraping sound on the plate. I remember, she said. That cheap chocolate. Cloyingly sweet. But you cried. I was sick and emotional. She put down her knife and fork and dabbed her mouth with a napkin. Sebastiana. We're not children anymore. Sentimentality gets you nowhere. Yes. Nowhere. Just like those yellowed memories. Those moments we thought mattered. All light as smoke in the face of reality. After dinner. She pulled out a contract. The new performance plan for the design department needs your signature. I flipped to the last page. Where the signature line was blank. I picked up the pen. The tip hovering over the paper. A small dot of ink forming. What if I don't sign? Then the company will appoint a new design director. Victoria said calmly. Sebastiana. Don't make this difficult for me. I signed. My handwriting was shaky. Nothing like my usual signature. She put the contract away and called for the check. The board meeting next week, she said as she left. You'll be there. Right? Mom wants both of us there. Yeah. She left. The sound of her high heels fading away. I sat by the window. Watching the river view. The tour boats came and went. Their lights breaking and reforming on the water. My phone vibrated with a text from my father, "The soup is still warm." I replied, "Tomorrow." When I walked out of the restaurant. The night wind was strong. Billowing my coat. The parking garage was 3 floors below. As the elevator descended. The mirror showed a woman with pale skin and dark circles under her eyes. I drove home. The streets almost empty. At a red light. I saw an elderly couple selling hot dogs from a cart on the sidewalk. The man was turning the sausages. The woman was taking the money. And they were laughing together. The fire from the grill lit up their faces. Red and warm. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. And the little fire grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared into the night. I got back to my apartment at 11. In the shower. I let the hot water run for a long time until my skin turned pink. When I dried off and stood in front of the mirror. The scar on my chest was clearly visible. I ran my fingers over it. Feeling the uneven texture. I lay in bed with my eyes closed but couldn't sleep. A flood of memories came rushing back, the sunset on the roof of Parsons. The smell of fabric in the warehouse. Old Tom's trembling hand as he drew. The blue stains on Mr. Anderson's knuckles. And that 3% equity. My mother had said it was more than enough. My phone screen lit up in the darkness with a news alert, Viridian Group plans Hong Kong IPO. Valuation could exceed $10 billion. I turned off my phone and rolled over. A car passed outside. Its headlights sweeping across the ceiling, on. Off. On. Off. I finally fell asleep and dreamed it was raining. I was standing in the yard of our old Long Island house. And the oak tree was covered in white flowers. I tried to climb it. but the branches were too high. When I looked up, Victoria was sitting in the tree, wearing that pale apricot suit, waving at me. I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I went to my study and unrolled the jacket pattern. Stars. 5-pointed stars. Gradient colors. Old Tom had written in the notes, red stars are passionate. White stars are cool. Blue stars are gentle. A single branch can hold all 3 colors. That's where life is. I spread out a sheet of paper and picked up a pencil. I drew the branches. I drew the stars. 1, 2, 3. Intertwined. Overlapping. Dense in some places. Sparse in others. I drew until dawn. When the first light seeped through the curtains and fell on the paper. The stars had shadows now. Depth. Life. My alarm went off. A new day. New meetings. New documents. New optimizations. I put down my pencil and looked at the paper covered in stars. Then I gathered them all up. Put them in a folder. And labeled it, unfinished. Outside. The city was waking up. The sound of traffic. Birdsong. The distant thud of construction. An ordinary day. No different from yesterday. I washed up. Got dressed. And headed out. In the elevator. I ran into the same neighbor. With the same dark circles. Morning, she yawned. Another long day. Yeah. I walked to my car. A few more leaves had fallen on the hood. I picked one up, it was dry and crumbled easily between my fingers. I started the car. And the radio came on automatically. Playing that same old song, Time is a Journey with No Return. This time I didn't turn it off. The song filled the car. The raspy male voice accompanied by a simple guitar. I merged onto the main road into the morning traffic. At a red light. I looked at the car next to me. The driver was drinking coffee. And in the passenger seat was a little girl with pigtails and a backpack. Eating a muffin. The light turned green. We both pressed the gas. Driving side by side for a while before turning at the intersection. She turned right. I went straight. In the rearview mirror. Her taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the morning mist. Just like so many people. So many things. They come. They go. They exist. Then they vanish. But the road goes on. Forward. Whether you want it to or not. I discovered something was wrong with the accounts on a Wednesday afternoon. The design department layoff list had been officially announced. 5 of the 12 people were gone. Including old Tom. Half the desks in the office were empty. And the remaining people spoke in hushed tones. As if afraid to disturb something. Zoe had been transferred to marketing. And Sarah had stayed but taken a 40% pay cut. She handed in her resignation the next day. Her eyes swollen like walnuts. Saying her husband was divorcing her because she made too little money. I'm sorry. Director, she placed the letter on my desk. Her fingers trembling. I signed it without looking up. What was there to say? Don't go? It will get better? I didn't believe it myself. 2 of the office plants had died. And facilities hadn't come to replace them. The dead leaves lay on the edge of the pots. And no one swept them up. I sat in my chair staring at the sales data on my computer screen. The American Heritage collection had been officially removed from the website. And inventory clearance had begun. I watched 2 minutes of the live stream. Where the host held up that indigo denim jacket and shouted. $9.99 with free shipping. Only 100 left. 3 days of embroidery. Now selling for $9.99. I closed the livestream page and opened the company's internal system. As design director, I had access to purchasing data and sales reports, but not to detailed financial statements. I stared at the screen for a long time, suddenly remembering something old Joe had mentioned in passing when I visited the warehouse last month. This recent shipment of denim is ridiculously overpriced. I hadn't paid attention at the time, but now it seemed odd. Fabric prices fluctuated, but ridiculously overpriced? I pulled up the purchasing records for the past year. Denim, linen, waxed cotton. I went through them one by one. When I reached the December records, my finger froze. A shipment of Italian denim had been purchased at 35% above market price. I kept going. October, a shipment of imported cashmere, 28% above market. August, a shipment of handmade lace, 42% above market. This wasn't normal. An occasional overcharge might be market fluctuation, but multiple consecutive overcharges, all at exorbitant rates? Something was wrong. I took screenshots and sent them to a college friend who worked at one of the Big Four accounting firms. Her name was Ben Cohen, a CPA who was now a manager at Ernst Young. The message read, "Can you take a look? Are these prices normal?" Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Sebastiana, where did you get this data?" Ben's voice was low. "Our company's purchasing records." There was a long silence on the other end. "I can't say for sure, but I suggest you look into the suppliers' backgrounds. Premiums this high usually mean either kickbacks or money laundering." Money laundering. The words hit me like a needle to the ear. "Can you be more specific?" "Look." Ben spoke quickly. "This denim is about $30 a yard market price. And you're paying $40. Let's say you buy 10,000 yards, that's a $100,000 difference. Where does that money go? If the supplier is connected to the purchaser, the money goes around in a circle, comes back clean, and ends up in a private account. How do I check for connections? Check corporate ownership, directors, registered addresses. But if it's real, they'll have covered their tracks well." She hesitated. "Sebastiana, what's going on over there? Do you need help?" "Not yet. Let me look into it more first." I hung up, my palms sweating. Outside, the sky was darkening, and the lights in Viridian Tower were coming on floor by floor. I stared at the numbers on the screen, which seemed to crawl like ants. If Ben was right, when had these overcharges started? How many people were involved? Did Victoria know? Did my mother know? Now she must know. The company was her life, she watched every penny. Unless. I shook my head, dismissing the thought. It was too absurd. I stayed late after work. When everyone had left, I reopened the system. This time I wasn't looking at purchasing records, but at cash flow. I had access to design department project funds, but only the totals, not the details. I stared at those numbers for a long time, suddenly remembering something. Last March, the design department had applied for a $500,000 traditional craft research and development fund for embroidery techniques in the American Heritage Collection. The money had been approved, but only $300,000 had actually been spent. Where had the other $200,000 gone? I'd asked finance at the time, and they'd said it was reallocated for general use. In hindsight, that was far too vague. I found the application file and looked for the approval signature, Victoria Vanderbilt. I kept going. November the year before, a $400,000 Fabric Innovation Experiment Fund for developing new eco-friendly fabrics. The project had run for 3 months and then been abandoned without results. Where had the money gone? Further back. August 2 years ago. The more I found, the colder my heart grew. Over 3 years, the design department had applied for 6 special funds totaling $2.7 million. Less than half had actually been used on the projects. Where had all that money gone? Without access to detailed financial statements, I could only note down the discrepancies. I created an encrypted folder and organized all the screenshots, data, and timelines. I named the folder Q for question. It was 9 o'clock by the time I finished. I was alone in the office. Most of the lights off except for the one above my desk. The screen's glow reflected in the window, showing a woman with pale skin and sunken eyes. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Why are you still at work?" "Just some things to finish up. Tomorrow is your father's birthday. Come home for dinner." She paused. "Victoria will be there too." "I know." I hung up and stared at the black screen. It reflected the neon lights outside. Red and green, like flowing paint. The next day at work, I started paying attention to details I'd always ignored before. At the morning meeting, the CFO was presenting quarterly results. When he got to other expenses, he suddenly spoke faster and glossed over it. I flipped to that section in the report. The number was significant, $8.6 million. The note read, "Marketing and Business Entertainment." The marketing director then spoke, presenting the new quarter's marketing plan with a budget of $6 million, including celebrity endorsements, social media campaigns, and offline events. Where had the extra $2.6 million gone? After the meeting, I deliberately stayed behind. When everyone had left, I went back to the conference room and took a photo of the numbers still written on the whiteboard. Back in my office, Zoe, now Zoe from marketing, sent me a Slack message. "Director, I saw you taking a photo of the whiteboard. I have the detailed data if you need it." I was surprised. I replied, "Is that okay? After work tonight." "Same place as always." The same place was the Starbucks downstairs where we used to go after overtime. At 8 o'clock, I found her sitting in the back booth. "This is everything I could get my hands on." She pushed a USB drive across the table, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't copy everything, so I took photos with my phone. Some are blurry. Sorry." The USB drive was plain black. No logo. I held it in my hand, the metal cold against my skin. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Zoe stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the cup. "The day old Tom left," she said, "I saw you run after him downstairs. You were the only one in the whole company who did." "That's it?" And she looked up, her eyes shining in the dim light. "When Sarah left, you tried to give her 3 months extra severance, even though finance rejected it. You tried." I gripped the USB drive tightly, saying nothing. "Director." Zoe leaned forward slightly. "There's something else I don't know if I should tell you." "Tell me." Last month, I was helping the marketing director organize expense reports, and I saw an invoice from Tiffany Company for $128,000. The payer was our company, but the recipient, she hesitated, was Victoria. A chill ran down my spine. The invoice was made out to the company? Yes. But the item description said custom luxury jewelry, and the attached receipt was handwritten with no specific items. I asked finance about it, and they said it was a normal business gift expense, $128,000 worth of jewelry as a business gift. For whom? And why was it in Victoria's name? Also, Zoe's voice was even lower. Last week I was dropping off files in finance, and I heard them talking about Victoria's Hamptons house renovation. They said the crystal chandelier alone cost over $300,000. But just last month, Victoria said in a meeting that the company was cutting all non-essential expenses. The house. I knew that house in Maidstone, Hamptons, a single-family mansion with a private beach. She'd bought it last year, saying she'd used her own savings and taken out a mortgage. But if a single chandelier cost $300,000. Have you told anyone else about this? I asked. Zoe shook her head. I'm scared. I've been with the company for 5 years. Finally got permanent residency. Got a raise. Got married. My husband says I should mind my own business. I understood. In New York, keeping your job was everything. Mortgages, car payments, daycare, every dollar weighed heavily. Thank you, I said. Don't mention this to anyone else. She nodded, finished her coffee quickly, and left. At the door, she glanced back at me, her eyes a mixture of worry and hope. I got home at 10 o'clock. I turned on my computer and inserted the USB drive. It contained dozens of photos. Some clear, some blurry. I went through them one by one, like putting together a broken puzzle. The photo of the jewelry invoice was exactly as Zoe had described. $128,000. Payer Viridian Group. Recipient Victoria Vanderbilt. Dated November 3 last year. I kept going. There was a partial photo of a renovation contract. Victoria Vanderbilt, the construction company. Total value $2.8 million. Signed August last year. And there was a screenshot of a bank transfer showing Viridian Group sending $3 million to a company called Spectrum Culture. With the note brand promotion fee, dated January this year. Spectrum Culture. I'd never heard of it. I looked it up online. Corporate records showed Spectrum Culture Media LLC. Registered capital $5 million. Legal representative Sophia Carter. Registered address in an office building in Queens. Founded 2 years ago. I dug deeper. Using Crunchbase, I found that one of Spectrum Culture's shareholders was Robert Vanderbilt, my uncle. My father's younger brother. Uncle Robert? How was he involved with this company? From what I remembered, my uncle was a quiet man. He'd started the business with my father but later split off due to differences in management philosophy, starting his own construction company. He was supposedly successful, but we didn't see much of him, only for Thanksgiving dinner every year, where we exchanged polite pleasantries and nothing more. If Spectrum Culture was partially owned by my uncle, and Viridian had sent them $3 million, I took screenshots of all this information and added it to folder Q. The list of questions was growing like a snowball, getting bigger and bigger. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I still couldn't sleep. I got up to get a glass of water and stood on the balcony. The night wind was cold, clearing my head. Most of the lights in the building across the street were out, only a few still glowing like sleepy eyes. My phone suddenly vibrated with a text from Ben. Still up? I asked a friend who does risk management about what you sent. She said if this is really money laundering, they usually use a shell company to move the funds. Does your company have any investments in small, obscure companies? I thought for a moment and replied, there's one called Spectrum Culture. Just founded. Check their cash flow. If the money goes in and quickly comes back out under various guises, that's basically confirmation. How? I don't have access. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before she finally replied, I know a private investigator. Reliable. But she charges. I can introduce you if you want. I stared at that message, my finger hovering over the screen. Private investigator. Something I'd only seen in movies. How much? I asked. Depends on the difficulty. Basic investigation starts at $5,000. $5,000. I had a little over $10,000 in my bank account. Saved up over the years. I hadn't bought a house or a fancy car. Just saved most of my salary. I'd been planning to save enough to open my own studio. My own brand. Now I was considering spending that money to investigate my own family. I'll think about it, I replied. Sebastiana. Ben sent another message. As a friend. Let me say this. Family issues are best resolved privately. If you find something concrete, there may be no going back. No going back. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then I turned off my phone and went back inside. The computer was still on. The screen showing Spectrum Culture's corporate information. Legal representative Sophia Carter. 45 years old. The photo showed a woman with a standard professional smile. Like a hotel receptionist. I suddenly remembered something. Last Thanksgiving, my uncle had brought a woman to dinner, introducing her as his company's CFO. That woman, I was almost certain, had been named Carter. I hadn't paid attention at the time. But now the age and appearance matched perfectly. If Sophia Carter worked for my uncle's company, and Spectrum Culture was doing business with Viridian, my head was spinning. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a gray hair at my temple. 32 years old. My first gray hair. I pulled it out and held it between my fingers. White. Almost transparent in the light. The next day was my father's birthday. I left work early and went to the mall to buy a present, a cashmere scarf. Since my father had shoulder problems and was always cold. As I passed Tiffany Company, I saw a diamond necklace in the window with a price tag that read, $128,000. I stopped and stared at the necklace. It was a simple design, with small diamonds arranged in the shape of petals, sparkling under the spotlights. $128,000, equivalent to 3 design department employees' annual salaries. A sales associate came out to greet me. Interested in this necklace? Ma'am? It's our new collection. Does anyone actually buy this? Oh yes, she smiled sweetly. We sold one just last week. A lady bought it for her own birthday. Can I see an invoice? I need to see the format for reference. She looked surprised but went inside to get a blank one. I took a photo and compared it to the one on my phone. The format was identical. Even the position of the stamp. Was that lady's last name Vanderbilt? I asked. The sales associate's smile froze. Ma'am, we can't disclose customer information. Her expression said it all. I left the mall to find the sky had clouded over. Threatening rain. I put the scarf in the trunk and got in the car. But didn't start the engine immediately. I watched people coming and going from the mall. Some carrying shopping bags. Some empty-handed. Everyone was in a hurry. Everyone had somewhere to go. And me? Where was I going? The drive home was slow with traffic. Manhattan Midtown was a parking lot. The radio was playing financial news, mentioning Viridian Group as a model of transformation for traditional apparel companies and rejuvenated under its young leader. Young leader. Victoria Vanderbilt. I arrived at the old Long Island house at 6:30. It was a single-family mansion that my parents had bought 20 years ago, when this area was still undeveloped and now was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods. The old oak tree was still in the yard, its branches bare in winter. I parked and saw Victoria's Porsche already there, black. Brand new. Gleaming coldly in the dusk. When I walked in, Martha the housekeeper greeted me. Sebastiana. You're here. You've lost weight. Just been busy. I handed her the scarf. Where's Dad? In his study practicing his golf swing. Your mother's in the kitchen. Insisted on baking the cake herself. I nodded and walked toward the living room. Victoria was sitting on the sofa, looking at her phone. She looked up when she heard me. You made it. Yeah. Presents on the table, she gestured to the coffee table. A set of tit-laced golf clubs. Obviously expensive. Did you buy those? I asked. Client gift. Killing two birds with one stone, she put down her phone. Heard you've been working late a lot lately. Design department stuff. Should be easier after the restructuring, she smiled. Or are you busy with something else? My heart skipped a beat. But I kept my face neutral. What else would I be busy with? I don't know. That's why I asked. She stood up and poured herself a glass of red wine. Mom says you've been under a lot of stress lately. She told me to check on you. Thanks for checking. The conversation died there. Just then, my father came out of his study and smiled when he saw me. Sebastiana. There you are. Martha. Make some tea. My father was getting old. His hair was completely white now. And his back was slightly stooped. But his eyes still lit up when he saw me. And that was something that couldn't be faked. Happy birthday, Dad. I said. Thank you. Thank you. He pulled me down to sit next to him. How have you been? Work keeping you busy? Same as always. Your mother told me about the design department changes. It must be stressful. I'm used to it. My father patted my hand. His palm warm but rough with calluses. Those hands had held me as a baby. Taught me to write. And had hit me exactly once, when I insisted on dropping out of college to go to Parsons. That slap had been so hard my face was swollen for 3 days. Later that night, he'd snuck into my room and left a tube of ointment on my nightstand. Saying nothing. You know, he sighed. Don't work too hard. Victoria has the company under control. Just do your own thing and take it easy. I'd heard that line my whole life. Your sister will handle it. You just take it easy. As if I was born to live in Victoria's shadow, easy. Safe. And completely insignificant. My mother came out of the kitchen. Wearing an apron and with flour on her hands. Sebastiana. Perfect timing. Help me set the table. I followed her into the kitchen. On the counter was the birthday cake and the dishes. My mother was wiping down the counter. Her movements efficient. I washed my hands and started placing the plates. Victoria told me you've been looking into the company accounts, my mother said suddenly. I almost dropped a plate. No. I haven't. I said. Continuing to set the table. Good, she kept wiping the counter. The company has finance. Audit. And Victoria to handle those things. You just focus on design. What if there's something wrong with finance? The cloth stopped moving. My mother looked up at me. What kind of wrong? Overpriced purchases. Missing funds. Related party transactions. I said it all in one breath. Staring into her eyes. Mom. Do you know about any of this? The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside. It was completely dark. And our reflections stared back at us from the window, one sitting. One standing. Like a still life painting. Yes, my mother said. Resuming wiping the counter. So what? I froze. She knew? She'd known all along? Then why haven't you done anything about it? My voice trembled. Done what about it? She put down the cloth and wiped her hands. Victoria is preparing for the IPO. And she needs the books to look good. Some expenses can't be on the official records. So they have to go through other channels. Paying a little more to suppliers. Getting kickbacks. The money goes around and comes back to boost the company's cash flow. Every public company does this. She said it so casually. As if explaining why you put sugar in cake. That's illegal. I said. So what? My mother smiled. And there was a coldness in that smile I'd never seen before. Rules are made by people. After the IPO. When the stock price triples. What's a little illegality? Sebastiana. You're so naive. Naive. There was that word again. When I wanted to rescue a stray dog as a child. She called me naive. When I wanted to have an art exhibition in college. She called me naive. Now. When I told her the company was breaking the law. She still called me naive. So where is all that money really going? I asked. To Victoria's house? Her jewelry? Or my uncle's company? My mother's face changed. What have you found out? Enough. I said. Spectrum Culture. Sophia Carter. The $3 million brand promotion fee. Mom. Why is Viridian funding my uncle's company? That's a legitimate business partnership. Legitimate? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of the jewelry invoice. What about this? $128,000 worth of jewelry as a business gift. In Victoria's name. Who was it for? My mother stared at the screen. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The kitchen light shone down from above, casting deep shadows on her face. Sebastiana, she said slowly. Some things are better left unknown. I need to know. I said. I have a right to know. I'm a Vanderbilt too. I've worked here for 8 years. I own 3% of this company, even if it is only 3%. I emphasized that last part heavily. And she heard it. Her eyes flickered. That 3%, she said, was to keep the board quiet. You know how difficult those old shareholders can be. We had to give them something. So that was it. It wasn't for me, it was to shut other people up. Like giving a beggar a coin not to help her, but to make her go away. So that's why. I heard my voice shaking. That's why I get 3%? That's why I'm being pushed out of management? That's why I have to watch while you loot the company. We are not looting the company, my mother raised her voice. We are building it. After the IPO, the market value will double. And that 3% will be worth a fortune. I don't want the money. I shouted back. I want fairness. I want respect. I want you to treat me like a daughter. Like family. Not like an inconvenience to be disposed of. The words hung in the air. And the kitchen fell deathly silent. The frosting on the cake was starting to melt at the edges. The smell of vanilla filled the air. But it made me sick to my stomach. My mother looked at me for a long time. Then she turned away and went back to wiping the counter. Her movements mechanical and forceful. After dinner, she said. We're going to have a family meeting. There's something you need to know. What something? You'll find out then. She wouldn't say anything more. I stood in the kitchen watching her back. I'd watched that back for 32 years, from when I was a child looking up at her. To now when we were almost the same height. But in that moment, she felt like a complete stranger. Dinner was a silent affair. My father tried to keep the conversation going. Talking about his recent golf games and the flowers blooming in the garden. Victoria smiled and complimented his swing. My mother responded occasionally. Her voice flat. I ate my steak, which tasted like cardboard. After dinner, my father made tea. The four of us sat in the living room like participants in some formal negotiation. Martha finished cleaning the kitchen and went to her room early. Sebastiana, my mother began. I can answer your questions from today. But before I do, you need to understand one thing, this family. This company. didn't get to where it is today easily. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. 30 years ago, your father and I started from nothing with a small tailor shop. At our poorest, we couldn't pay the rent. Your father worked construction, and I worked 3 jobs a day. Victoria was only 3 years old then, living with us in a basement where she got frostbite every winter. I'd heard this story 100 times. Every time I disobeyed. Every time I questioned their decisions. This story was trotted out. Then the business grew. We opened a factory. We built a brand. But your uncle got jealous and wanted to split the company. And it got ugly. In the end, we gave him all the company's liquid assets just to get rid of him. My mother took a sip of tea. So Sebastiana, this company isn't just a company, it's our life. We can't let it fail. We can't let anything happen to it. So you break the law? You launder money? I asked. That's not money laundering. Victoria suddenly spoke. Her voice cold. It's tax optimization. It's capital structuring. What do you know? While you were studying painting at Parsons, I was studying finance at Harvard. Do you know how to grow a business? Do you know how to keep shareholders happy? Do you know how to survive in this brutal market? A barrage of questions. Each one a slap in the face. I don't know, I said. But I know the difference between right and wrong. Right and wrong? Victoria laughed. A bitter, mocking laugh. You think all those public companies are clean? You have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. Childish. Victoria, my father tried to intervene. But his voice was weak. Stay out of this. Dad. Victoria turned back to me. Let me be clear. Sebastiana. The company is going public. And we need clean books and strong cash flow. These operations are necessary. Once the IPO is successful, everything will be above board. This is just a transition period. A transition period gives you the right to break the law? What do you want to do about it? Victoria stood up, towering over me. Report us? Send mom and dad to prison? Ruin the company? Put everyone out of work? I never said. That's exactly what you're saying, she cut me off. You feel wronged. You feel entitled. So you want to destroy everything. Sebastiana Vanderbilt. Let me tell you something, there is no absolute fairness in this world. I was top of my class at everything. I got a full scholarship to Harvard while you were off painting. I doubled the company's profits while you were making clothes no one wanted to buy. Now that the company is going public, you suddenly want to talk about fairness? You don't deserve it. Every word was a knife, twisting in the softest part of my heart. I looked at her. At that face that shared 3 features with mine. And felt a stranger looking back. So that's why you gave me 3%? I heard my voice. Calm and terrible. Because I'm not as good as you? Because I'm not useful enough? At least you got 3%, my mother said. Her voice exhausted. Sebastiana. Stop this. After the IPO. We'll compensate you. You want a studio. You want your own brand, mom will support you. But not now. Please. Stop this. When I fell and cried as a child. She told me to stop this. When I didn't want to go to school. She told me to stop this. Now. When I told her the company was breaking the law. She still told me to stop this. As if my entire life had been nothing but a tantrum. I stood up and walked toward the door. The living room was large. And it took a dozen steps to get from the sofa to the entrance. Each step felt like walking on cotton. Soft and unsteady. Sebastiana, my father called after me. I didn't turn around. As my hand closed around the doorknob. My mother's voice came from behind me, "Daughter. Don't go yet. I haven't finished speaking." I stopped but didn't turn around. "There's something," she said. Her voice soft but every word clear. "That I've never told you. About who you really are. About that 3%. About why." "Eleanor," my father suddenly interrupted. His voice urgent. "Don't." I slowly turned around. In the living room. My father was deathly pale. My mother's lips were pressed tightly together. And Victoria was looking away. Refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "About what?" I asked. My mother took a deep breath and looked at my father. "It's too late to keep it from her now." My father shook his head. His eyes filled with pleading. "Sebastiana," my mother turned to me. And each word fell like a stone. "You are not our biological daughter." Time seemed to stand still. The clock in the living room stopped ticking. The wind outside stopped blowing. Even my breathing stopped. All I could hear was my own heart. Thudding like a drum. "What did you say?" My voice sounded distant. As if coming from someone else. 32 years ago, my mother said. Her voice steady as if telling someone else's story. "After I gave birth to Victoria. I had complications and couldn't have any more children. But we wanted a daughter. So, we adopted you from an orphanage." Orphanage. Adopted. The words drove into my skull like ice picks. Turning everything to white noise. "We were going to tell you when you turned 18, she continued. "But you were always so sensitive. We were afraid you wouldn't take it well. That 3% equity was out of affection for all these years. After all, you're not a Vanderbilt by blood, technically. You shouldn't have anything at all." I opened my mouth to speak. But no sound came out. My eyes moved from my mother's face to my father's. Then to Victoria's. They were all looking at me. Their expressions a mixture of concern, guilt, and relief. So that was it. That was the answer. Why it was always Victoria. Why it was always 3%. Why I was always the afterthought. Because I wasn't theirs. Because I was adopted. Because I didn't deserve it. "Which orphanage?" I heard myself ask. "St. Mary's Orphanage in Queens," my mother said. "It's been demolished now. Your biological mother was an unmarried college student who left you after you were born. You were 3 months old when we adopted you. 3 months old. So small." I remembered nothing. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Because you insisted on digging." Victoria spoke up. Her voice cold. "Because you suspected us. Because you thought you were so wronged. Now you know. You're not a Vanderbilt. Giving you 3% was more than enough. You should be grateful." Grateful. What a perfect word. Like charity. Like a gift. Like condescending mercy from on high. I looked at them, the 3 people I'd called mom, dad, and sister for 32 years. Their faces were suddenly so unfamiliar. As if I'd never seen them before. The living room lights were bright. Almost painfully so. I saw the fine lines around my mother's eyes. The white hair at my father's temples. The small mole on Victoria's chin, details I'd seen every day for 32 years. Yet today they looked like I was seeing them for the first time. Then I heard my voice. Calm and terrible. "Where is my biological mother?" My mother and father exchanged a glance. Hesitating. "She's dead." It was Victoria who spoke. She pulled a document from her bag and threw it on the coffee table. It was a yellowed copy of a death certificate. The name field reading, Sarah Miller, date of death, 32 years ago. Cause of death, postpartum hemorrhage. She died right after giving birth to you. Victoria's voice was completely emotionless. So don't go looking for her. Don't expect some dramatic reunion from a TV show. You were an orphan. And the Vanderbilts took you in and raised you for 32 years. Sebastiana. You owe us gratitude. Orphan. Gratitude. I bent down and picked up the death certificate. The paper was brittle. The edges frayed. The handwriting was faded but still legible. Sarah Miller. Female. 21 years old. Date of death March 12. 1994, March 12. 1994, my birthday was March 15th. 3 days apart. The dates don't match. I said. What? My mother frowned. My birthday is March 15th. But she died on March 12th. I looked up at them. How can a woman who's been dead for 3 days give birth to me? The living room fell completely silent. My mother's face changed color. My father's hands started shaking. And Victoria jumped to her feet. That's a hospital record error. Who can remember details from 32 years ago? Someone can. I pointed to the death certificate. This has the hospital seal and the doctor's signature. If the date was wrong, why wasn't it corrected in 32 years? If she was my mother, why was I born 3 days after she died? Question after question crashed into the silence. My mother opened her mouth to speak but nothing came out. My father clutched his chest. His face white. Victoria lunged forward to grab the certificate. But I stepped back. Out of her reach. This death certificate is fake. Isn't it? I looked at them. My background is fake. The orphanage is fake. Everything is fake. Why? Why lie to me like this? Sebastiana. Listen to me. My mother's voice trembled. I want the truth. I said. Each word sharp and clear. Now. My father suddenly started coughing violently. His face turning bright red. My mother rushed to help him. And Victoria went to get water. In the chaos, I stood there holding the death certificate. Like a woman standing in the middle of a desert. When my father had recovered, my mother looked up at me. Tears in her eyes. This was the first time I'd ever seen her cry, real tears. Not acting. Not pretense. Fine, she said. Her voice hoarse. I'll tell you the truth. But Sebastiana. Be prepared. It's a truth you may not be able to bear. I clenched my fists. My nails digging into my palms. Tell me. Your biological mother was indeed named Sarah Miller. And she did give birth to you. But she didn't die. My mother wiped away her tears. She's alive. And what? And she's been looking for you. The words hit me like thunder. I stared at her. Watching her lips form the name that froze the blood in my veins. She is Sophia Carter, the legal representative of Spectrum Culture. And your uncle's current wife. The world went silent. All sound disappeared. Leaving only that name echoing in my head, Sophia Carter. Sophia Carter. Sophia Carter. The woman with the standard professional smile in the photo. The CFO my uncle had brought to Thanksgiving. The woman who might be involved in money laundering, was my biological mother? No. I heard my own voice. Weak as a child's. That's impossible. It's true. Victoria spoke. Her voice with a cruel calmness. After she gave birth to you, she took a large sum of money from the Vanderbilts and promised to leave forever. But over the years, she's been finding ways to get close to the company. To get close to you. Spectrum Culture was her tool to do that. I stumbled back. Catching myself on the wall. The cold stone seeped through my palm and into my bones. So that money? I asked mechanically. The money sent to Spectrum Culture. Hush money, my mother closed her eyes. Every month. Since you joined the company. We thought if we paid her, she'd stay away. But she got greedier and greedier, asking for more and more. So that was it. That was the truth. I wasn't an orphan. I had a mother. But this mother had been watching me from the shadows all these years. Taking money from the Vanderbilts, from my family, through a shell company. And I had been a fool. Knowing nothing. Holding on to that 3% equity. Feeling wronged. Demanding fairness. Why? My voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Tell you what? Victoria sneered. Tell you your biological mother is a blackmailer? Tell you how much money she's extorted from the Vanderbilts over the years? Tell you that if it wasn't for keeping her quiet, you wouldn't have gotten even that 3%? Every word was a slap across my face. I looked at them. At those three familiar yet alien faces. I suddenly laughed. Laughed until tears came to my eyes. So, I said between laughs, my entire life has been a transaction? I'm a bargaining chip. Hush money. A bill you have to pay every month? Sebastiana. My father tried to say. But I cut him off. Don't call me that. I shouted. Don't call me by that name. Sebastiana Vanderbilt? Do I even deserve the name Vanderbilt? The living room fell silent. Only my ragged breathing filled the space. Heavy and gasping. As if I were drowning. After a long time, my mother spoke. Her voice exhausted to the breaking point. Now you know everything. Sebastiana. Believe it or not. We truly loved you as a daughter for these 32 years. That money. The money we gave Sophia. Was our choice. We wanted to protect you. To keep you from the truth. To keep you from getting hurt. Protect me? I looked at her. At the woman I'd called mother for 32 years. Your way of protecting me was to let me live like a fool? To give me 3% equity and expect me to be grateful? What do you want then? Victoria stood up and walked over to me. Go to her? Reunite with that blackmailer? Then what? Let her keep sucking us dry? Or join her and loot the Vanderbilt family together? I looked at her. At that perfect, cold face. I suddenly remembered when I was a child and had a fever. And she'd stayed up all night with me. Wiping my body with a cool cloth. Back then. Her eyes had been gentle. Her hands warm. Where had that sister gone? Or had she never been my sister at all? I won't go to her. I said. My voice calm now. But I can't stay here anymore either. You're leaving? My mother asked. Yes. Where will you go? How will you live? On that 3% dividend? Victoria mocked. Don't forget. Your design collection is gone. You have no position left in the company. Then I won't rely on the company. I said. I won't rely on the Vanderbilts. I turned and pulled open the door. The night wind rushed in. Cold enough to cut to the bone. Sebastiana, my father called after me. His voice breaking. I didn't look back. Walking into the night. Behind me. I heard my mother crying. My father coughing. And Victoria's cold voice, let her go. If she leaves. Don't ever come back. I started the car. The engine roaring in the silent night. In the rearview mirror. The lights of the old Long Island house grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared around the corner. I drove onto the Long Island Expressway. Aimless. The radio played an old song. A woman's raspy voice singing, "What can I give you? My love. Love. I had no love. Family. I had no family. I had nothing. Not even the knowledge of who I really was." My phone vibrated on the passenger seat. Again and again. I glanced at it, calls from my mother. My father. My sister. Finally. An unknown number. I declined it. The number called again. I declined again. The third time. I answered. Sebastiana, a woman's voice came through the phone. Soft and unfamiliar. This is Sophia Carter. Can we meet?